Hello everyone, welcome to BYJU'S exam prep and good afternoon. So at the very outset, let me put the things in perspective. First of all, tell me, are we streaming all right and can you hear me? Yes. Varun, hi Varun, how are you? Good to see you too, dear, thank you. Yes, Harsh, absolutely. I will try to take up all the logical perspective and concepts that we are supposed to know before we start solving the questions. So just don't worry. Hi Disha, good afternoon. Hello Kaushal. All right. Okay. So welcome once again to BYJU'S Exam Prep, your trusted online platform for CAT exam and other non-CAT exams as well. This is Pradeep Sengupta, your VARC educator with BYJU'S Exam Prep. So we are meeting after a long time and I hope you all are doing great. So we are just a couple of days shy of CAT. And yes, as you can see on the slide, in my very first slide, we have this much coveted name being mentioned, IIM Bangalore. And this is what we are going to be talking about, the PYQ and the important parajumble questions, right? Strictly in close proximity to the PYQs taken up when IIM Bangalore conducted CAT way back in 2017 and 2007 and subsequently, I'm sorry. So this is it. Good afternoon, Gagandeep, Abhishek, good afternoon. All right. So what do we have in store today? We are going to be talking a bit about the MCQ Parajumbles from CAT 2007. This is the agenda. And as the Harsh rightly pointed out, that we should be talking a bit about the concepts involved in Parajumbles, right? And since it is going to be a theta-based, pattern, so you must make every, effort possible to score more in this area, because when you are scoring in parajumbles, the pressure is very light and we don't have to look at the other sections. But if parajumbles go wrong and horribly wrong, then it actually creates unnecessary pressure on us to do good in the other sections. Now, many books will tell you different options. Many book, talks about different options, different tricks, and different logic. I think the only pristine method, the only method which is tested and proven, is to be able to read well. Varun, in adaptive question, if you skip, see, skipping is definitely on the cards, but you have to be very careful with the kind of questions you are skipping, because the questions being adaptive, you have to be very careful on the kind of questions you are planning to let go, because you never know what the next question will be in store for you. So you better watch out. थोड़ा सा ध्यान रखेंगे. All right. So in this session, we will look at a few parajumble questions, and also we will try to solve a few theta-based questions based on CAT 2016. All right. And we will talk about different approach to solve different parajumble questions. Now, the very first approach that I think of is to have a good head with common sense, right? Common sense is very important, right? And there is no substitute to reading. Now, there are two things. You are good at English, you're good at communication, that is different. But you're good at reading and you are good at drawing inferences are two different things. All right? They are two different things, reading with inference and reading with the purpose. So we have seen over the years that anybody with a good set of reasoning skills, with a good set of reading skills, when you can see through the question, when you can see the soul of the concept being discussed in the passage, you try to get the sequence, you tend to get the sequence right. All right. So first and foremost, it's all about reading. Also, right? please take care of the bond. Many a times we talk about, different concepts and different ideas which we think are difficult to, bring home, which we find it very difficult to understand. But a good reading, right? Be very calm and composed first of all. Many a times what happens, the length of the parajumble, it gets on our nerves. And we tend to lose marbles when we look at the length of the parajumbles. You might have noticed it. If the parajumble is shorter, right, it gives us confidence. But if it is long, right, then probably we get a bit scared. So understand one thing, whether it is irrespective of the length of the paragraph, first up, you should not be scared of reading the question properly. All right, so quite a few queries over here. NMAT, can we stick to the parajumble question that we are discussing today? And subsequently, we will take up NMAT in the due course of time, if that is all right with you. All right. So first up, we will talk about the reading of the question, and then we will see how we do the bonding part. All right. Now, if you look at the basic skills which are necessary in order to get a parajumble question right, it boils down to the understanding, right? Very simply, it boils down to the understanding of the text, right? It's important that we understand the text all right, number one. Number two, the thought process or the thought flow, right? Always remember, right? अगर आपका thought flow थोड़ा सा haywire है, then probably we are going to get all the sequencing wrong. And it is not about getting the right answer or the wrong answer. Probably what you are thinking is right because you have a different perspective. But Cat is thinking from a different perspective altogether. That is why you have to look at the organization, how the thoughts are going to be organized. So better if we have comprehended the passage well, and then we look at the organization. Many a times, there are two things which I always tell my students to follow. Either you follow the script link, right? Parajumbles come to you in the form of a script. Okay, look at the script and try to go for the link. Means what is the logical sequence? Okay, look for the bond, right? What are the ideas being discussed? And then again look for the bond. Okay, and then comes the verbal construct link. Okay, then comes the verbal construct link. Now in verbal construct link, like traditionally we approach parajumbles with, the grammar point of view, noun first and then the pronouns followed by a few adverbs and conjunctions. So we are going to look at the verbal construct link also. Okay, but more often than not, when you read the parajumbles, as the parajumbles are featuring over the years, it's the script link that the questions are going to follow. Okay, on that note, we are going to discuss a few questions, right? The first couple of questions will be MCQ in nature because back in 2007, IIM Bangalore, when conducted CAT for the first time in 2007, it was MCQ in nature. So we will look at a few questions, right, with MCQ pattern that will actually set the things in perspective. You will understand what exactly we are trying to do over here. And then subsequently, when we have, reasonably warmed up to the occasion, we will be solving a few questions which are non-MCQ type. Okay? All right. Now let us look at the very first question. All set, guys? Can we look at the very first question? Now in the first question, help is available, right? A is in its correct place, right? It is the B, C, D and E which are all jumbled up and you have to figure out the right option and the right sequence. Can we get going? All right. Let us look at the question, right? But at the very outset, let me tell you, don't let the length of the question bog you down. Read the question. I will be talking to you exactly 1 minute from now. All right. Can we see the answers coming through? Let's look at the very first question. Okay, Varun says it is D. Thank you, Varun. Oh, the last sequence. Kaushal says I can't see the last sequence properly. Kaushal, the last one, I think you're talking about E, if I'm not wrong. Let me read it out for you. It says, in addition, a third unofficial popular discourse comprising old wives, tales, and based on maternal experiences of childbirth has also been noted. These discourses have also been acknowledged in work exploring the experiences of those who apparently do not conform to conventional stereotypes of the good mother. This is what E is. All right. Okay. We know that. So quite a few sequences. E, B, E, D, B, C. All right. Thank you, Pratiksha. D, Vijay says D. All right. Now, one thing you might have noticed over here, if A is the intro sentence, it actually sets the ball rolling. It talks about personal experience of mothering and motherhood are largely framed in relation to two discernible official discourses. Now, if we are talking about two discernible official discourses, right? The first one being the medical discourse and natural childbirth discourse. Both of these tend to focus on the optimistic stories of birth and mothering and underpin stereotypes of the grandmother, of the godmother, I'm sorry. Now, in the very first statement, you have a clue. It's a very discernible clue. Two discourses. Now, that actually leads you to E. In addition, a third unofficial popular discourse comprising old wives, right? Now, if you look at the bonding, right? If you look at the bonding, A perfectly bonds with E. So, AE link is most discernible. There cannot be any other link possible, right? So, on that ground, we can cancel out B. Not possible. B talks about at the same time the need for medical expert. It cannot gel with A. So B is a goner. C is also eliminated because we have a beginning with something contrasting and overlapping, which does not go with the feeling of A. A talks about some discourses, two discourses, right? So AE link is most discernible. And AE link is present in A. It starts with E and D. Even B is gone. So either we are going to stick to A or we are going to stick to D. Now look at these two, right? So AED is very common, so we don't have to think about it, right? It's AED. Now if you look at E, E talks about these discourses have also been acknowledged in work exploring the experiences of those who apparently do not conform to conventional stereotypes of the good mother. I think I'm reading out the last option for all of you, the last part, the last sentence for all of you, so that you can, keep a tab of what is going on, right? Okay. So AED link is most discernible. Now, if you look at D, D talks about the contrasting, overlapping, and ambiguous strands within these frameworks focus to varying degrees on a woman's biological tie to her child and predisposition to instinctively know and be able to care for her child. Now, I want your attention in the very first question. What are the two discourses that the first sentence talks about? We are talking about mothering. We are talking about motherhood. Yes or no? The first discourse is the medical discourse. And the second discourse happens to be the childbirth discourse. And the third discourse talks about The unofficial discourse comprising old wives' tales based on maternal experience. Now, it's either D or A. So now if you look at the EDB link and the EDC link, if you look at C or if you look at B, B starts with at the same time. Look at the adverbial phrase over here. At the same time, the need for medical expert guidance is also a feature, right? Which, if you look at B very carefully, I'm sorry, D, we are talking about something, right? Like in D, we are talking about the contrasting, overlapping, and ambiguous strands within these framework focus to varying degrees on a woman's biological tie to her child. So, even is this enough? Right? Woman's biological tie to her child, is this enough? We need the medical attention also. And this medical attention thing is being talked about in B, and that is why this should have been the sequence. One followed by two in addition, right? Followed by three, the contrasting, followed by B, four, and then comes the last one, 5, right? I will be talking to you in these colors, red, blue, green, yellow. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. It will help you understand the sequence. All right, it will help you understand the sequence. So in this case, A is the answer. If you look at C, similarly, historical work has also shown how what are now taken for granted aspects of reproduction and mothering practices. So we are talking about two things together, reproduction and mothering practices result from the contemporary pseudoscientific directives and managed construct. Now this happens to be a standalone sentence, right? This happens to be a standalone sentence. The rest of the paragraph talks about motherhood. The rest of the paragraph talks about medical guidance. But over here, we are talking about something different, right? So any standalone sentence, right, should be the conclusion, right? Any standalone sentence should be the conclusion. So in this case, the answer should have been E, D, B, C, 1 being the starting point. Okay, so if you go by the, the script link, this is a script, that will help you understand the concept and the logic in a much better way. All right. Now, since this sets the ball rolling, can we now look at the next question? Yes, I think there is a small glitch with this screen, but I will try to read it out for you if it is possible. I would request the technical team to look into the matter as soon as possible. Let's look at A. A says, I had 6,000 acres of land and had thus got much spare land besides the coffee plantation. Part of the farm was native forest and about 1,000 acres were squatters' land, what the QUU called their chambers, whatever. B says, the squatters' land was more intensely alive than the rest of the farm and was changing with the seasons the year round. The maize grew up higher than your head, and as you walked on the narrow, hard, trampled footpaths in between the tall, green, rustling regiments. The squatters are natives who with their families hold a few acres on a white man's farm and in return have to work for him a certain number of days in the year. My squatters, I think, saw the relationship in a different light. For many of them were born on a farm and their fathers before them, and they very likely regarded me as a sort of superior squatter on their estates. D says, the Kikuyu also grew the sweet potatoes and have a vine-like leaf and spread over the ground like a dense entangled mat, and many varieties of big yellow and green speckled pumpkins. If you are unable to read the last sentence, let me read it for you. The beans ripened in the fields, were gathered and thrashed by the women, and the maize stalks and coffee pods were collected and burned, so that in their seasons thin blue columns, okay, of smoke rose here. It's ROSC, rose here and there all over the farm. Okay. Now, considering that the very first part of the parajumble is fixed, we cannot move it. Now, if you look at the construct of the parajumble, you will see that it is narrative, right? And later on, it describes a particular thing, right? It describes a process, right? Probably plantation and stuff like that. All right. So A begins with, I had 6,000 acres of land and had thus got much spare land besides the coffee plantation. That's okay. Part of the farm was native forest and about 1,000 acres was squatters. Now, for the first time, we see A talks about something called squatters. A talks about squatters. Okay, A talks about squatters. Now, we need a sentence that talks more on squatters, right? If you look at C, the squatters are natives. The squatters are natives. So, A and C is bonding, isn't it? So, this is one link which you must understand, right? Something that extends your thought, something that extends your thought. Okay, I call it the thought extender. This is again a very important clue to get through the parajumble questions. See, there are no other options that talks about the squatters, right? A introduces squatters and C talks about squatters. So AC link is mandatory, right? If you go to the option, we have C coming in A, B can be eliminated, you can keep C, you can eliminate D, you can eliminate E. So very quickly, we can eliminate B, D and E, and we are left with C and A only. So it's either the CBD link, if you go by A, or it's the CBE link, right? If you go by C, right? Let's see. So we know that C and B are bonding. So it's ACB. There is no doubt about it. Let's look at C. C talks about the squatters are natives who with their families hold a few acres on a white man's farm. So it talks about what squatters do, right? And in return have to work for him a certain number of days in a year. My squatters, I think, saw the relationship in a different light. Now, when you say my squatters, it means the person who is speaking is a white man. because squatters, they hold a few acres on a white man's land. So when you say my squatter, so there are some squatters who think that this white man, right? So the speaker is a white man over here. My squatters, I think, saw the relation in a different light. For many of them were born on the farm and their fathers before them, and they were very likely, and they very likely regarded me as a sort of superior squatter on their estates, right? Okay. Now, if you look at B, B talks more about the squatter's land. We started speaking about squatter, and B continues the thought process, the squatter's land. Okay. And if you look at the entire idea over here, the squatter's land was intensely alive than the rest of the farm and was changing with the seasons the year round. How? The maize grew up higher than your head. So a lot of plantation and irrigation was going on as you walked on the narrow, hard, trampled footpaths in between the tall, green, rustling regiments. So you need, a statement that actually continues the idea, right? The beans ripened in the field. If you look at E, E talks about the Kikiyu also grew. Now, all of a sudden, D talks about Kikiyu. So, can D be the next sentence? Can D be the next sentence after B? Is there a possibility? Right? Or should we go with E? That is the question which you need to answer. Right? I think E is a much better choice because it keeps talking about the irrigation and the plantation. Right? The beans ripened, right, in the fields were gathered and thrashed by women, and the maize stalks and coffee pods were collected. So we talk about this squatter's land. And then finally, you talk about the Kikiyu also grew sweet potatoes. Okay, so this is a standalone sentence, right? And this is an extra information being given to you, and that is why it should come at last. So your answer to this question should have been option C, right? C, B, E, D should have been the correct answer option. All right. If you go like this, C, B, E, D is the correct answer option. We start with A, right? Then you stay in C. We talk about squatters. Again, red, blue, green, yellow. Okay, so red is 1, blue is 2, green is 3, and yellow is 4. So C is the option for you, C, B, E, D. So if you have the idea planted in your mind, there will be no problem in getting to the right answer option. Okay, provided if the first option you know about already. Since we know the starter, that was why we did not have any problem arriving at option C, C, B, E, D. All right. So that was question number 2 for us. Always look for the bonding sentences, guys. Always look for the bonding sentences. If we are able to look at the bonding sentences, right, the rest of the things will fall in place. Okay. Let us look at question number 3 very quickly. This one can be a bit tricky for us, but let us see if we can see what can be done about it. A is fixed, you cannot change it. What does it tell you? In America, highly educated women who are in stronger position in the labor market than less qualified ones have higher rate of marriage than other groups. What is the idea that is being spoken of over here? Okay. Udit has marked C. Thank you, Udit. Disha is going with B. Thank you, Disha. Okay. Let us now look at the question very carefully. As we know that A gives you the beginning. A gives you the beginning. All right. So it's A. And what does A talk about? Highly educated women, of course, in America, right? In the labor market. I want your attention to this part of the sentence. In the labor market, have higher rates of marriage than other groups. Now, what are these other groups? It is not clear. Highly educated women in stronger position have higher rates of marriage than other groups. B talks about some supports the Becker thesis. So, can we say AB is a pair? And as with crime, it is equally inconclusive. Now, E being a pronoun, what does E refer to? Right? Has a point over here, isn't it? D says, but regardless of the conclusion of any particular piece of work, it is hard to establish convincing connection between family changes and economic factors using conventional approaches. Now, if you look at D, D talks about some piece of work, right? And B talks about thesis. B talks about thesis, all right? And if you look at E, indeed, just as with crime, now there is something new coming up over here. Just as with crime, an enormous academic literature exists on what? On the validity of the pure economic approach to the evolution of family structure. Just with crime as with crime. Can you see the bonding? Can you see the bonding? And as with crime. So can we not say that E and C can be linked? Let me write it down somewhere. E and C can be linked. Can we say this? Right? And since B talks about thesis, a piece of academic work being done, some work supports the Becker thesis and some appears to contradict it. Okay? But regardless of the conclusion, right, of any particular piece of work, don't you think that indirectly we are kind of talking about this thesis being mentioned? So there is a link between B and D also. There is a link between B and D. Can we say that? Right? Can we say that? All right. Now I want your attention in A. A talks about highly educated women having higher rates of marriage than other groups. So in this particular question, you are looking at the economic viability of marriage, right? Highly educated women have higher rates of marriage. Why would you marry somebody who is highly educated? good for your social standard, good for your, it can be looked upon as an economic gain, right? And E talks about, it actually extends the idea. It says, indeed, just as with crime. Now, marriage has got nothing to do with crime. It is but a comparative analysis being done over here, right? Can you see through it? Can you see through it? All right. Just as with crime, an enormous academic literature exists. So there are some academic work existing that actually talks about marriage, that actually talks about crime, and they talk about the validity of the pure economic approach to the evolution of family structure. And as with crime, it is equally inconclusive. So whatever the economic approach is, this is inconclusive. Now, what is this it? The pronoun, it refers back to the economic approach. I hope you are getting the idea over here. So, it's A definitely, right? It's A definitely, right? And then you have the BD link coming your way, right? It's A, then E, right? AE, followed by B, it's AE followed by C as with crime. So it's AEC, it's AEC, right? It's AEC. And then after C, you talk about something else. What are you talking about? You're talking about this thesis. So AECB. Can we go with that? Right? Can we look at this B and D approach? B and D approach. So it's EC and BD, right? So can we now safely conclude that this can be the answer option? Right? AE, now we have the E and C link. It's a mandatory link, you see, Udit, right? It's a mandatory link over here, right? You cannot move A. We are talking about the economic approach, some kind of approach that gives you gain. So highly educated women having higher rates of marriage than other groups. So what is this, right? It was a tricky one. EC approach or the EC link is mandatory over here. All right. Similarly, the BD link is also mandatory. It's EC followed by BD, right? That is why we have this AECBD approach. Okay, that takes us to option D. This was a tricky one, but this is how we are going to place it, right? Because the BD link cannot be shaken, it is going to be present. Similarly, the EC link, you cannot shake it because we are talking about just as with crime and as with crime. So both these statements deal with crime. So that's why EC link is mandatory over here. All right. Okay. I hope this answers the question. Okay. Now we have seen there were some questions that were based on, options. Now we are going to hit upon some questions which are going to be in non-MCQ type or the theta based question. All right. Now we will not have any options coming your way. We'll have to depend on our logic. All right. Let's look at question number 4. The process of handing down implies not a passive transfer, but some contestation in defining what exactly is to be handed down. B says, wherever Western scholars have worked on the Indian past, the selection is even more apparent than the inventing of a tradition much more recognizable. C says, every generation selects what it requires from the past and makes its innovations some more than others. D says it is now a truism to say that traditions are not handed down unchanged but are invented. And E says just as life has death as its opposite, so is tradition by default the opposite of innovation. Can we figure out the introductory sentence? This can be solved with this particular logic, thought extender. All right. Sia, you have to give us the correct sequence. We don't have an option over here. Okay, so you are referring to the introductory sentence here, if I'm not wrong. All right. Any idea which one should be the introductory sentence? CD. All right, Venice. All right, Harsh. ECDAB. Ganesh has answered it's ECDAB. Thank you. All right. Now, the most general sentence in this entire sequence is E. All right. Now, look at it. Just as life has death as its opposite, so is tradition by default the opposite of innovation. So, tradition and innovation, they are opposite to each other. This is what E tells you. All right. And then if you look at D, it is now a truism. What is a truism? Truism is a cliche, something which is boring, a boring statement. Nobody wants to listen to, right? It is now a truism to say that traditions are not handed down unchanged but invented. Now, I want your attention over here, right? This line tells you, this line tells you that traditions are not handed down. Handed down means something which is passed from one generation to another. So traditions are not passed down the way they are. They are slightly changed, right? We are talking about some kind of invention. We do something with the tradition, we add something to the tradition, we add something, we subtract something, we make it better, and then we pass it down to our next generation. This is what D tells you, right? So D gives you a concept. What is the thought? The thought is talking about tradition and the way they are passed down after adding or subtracting something to it or from it. All right. Now, if you look at ABC, A talks about the process of handing down implies not a passive transfer. It is not a passive transfer. Passive means, inactive. But some contestation, a competition, right, is there in defining what exactly is to be handed down. And this contestation, this sense of competition, right, is what D talks about. This is exactly what it talks about. Okay, so it's ED and DA. DA is a very strong link. Now, I want your attention to B and C. If you look at B, wherever Western scholars have worked on the Indian past, the selection is even more apparent. And if you read C, every generation selects what it requires from the past and makes its innovations some more than others. So the selection and selects, they are connected, isn't it? They are connected. So it has to be ED, right? Followed by DA, right? And ED, DA, right? And these two are so close. So C, B must follow C, right? Selects and the selection. So this link is mandatory. Look at the words. Okay, it's the article link. Okay, a boy, the boy. So a boy should come before the boy. That should lead you to this thought flow. Okay, it has to be E, right? Followed by D, then A, then C, then B. E, D, A, C, B should have been the link. Okay, I hope it is understood to you. E, D, A, C, B. I hope it is understood. Okay, why this link, right? E has to be the start, followed by D. Okay, that was question number 4 for us, and this was not very tough as the others that we were doing, right? This was an easy one. Let's look at one more. Now, this passage talks about self-management. This passage talks about self-management. Look at it. Self-management is thus defined as the individual's ability to manage the symptoms, treatment, physical and psychosocial consequences and lifestyle changes inherent in living with a chronic condition. B says, most people with progressive diseases like dementia prefer to have control over their own. C says, having control means, among other things, that patients themselves perform self-management activities. And D talks about supporting people in decision and action that promote self-management is called self-management support, requiring a cooperative relation between the patient, the family, and the professionals. Can we come up with the first pair, AB or BC or CD, whatever it is? All right, Harsh. Yes, Sudhit, you're absolutely right. So when you say generic statement, it has to be defined what exactly have you understood by a generic statement in a given parajumble question, isn't it? Now, if you look at A, the way the sentence begins, self-management is thus defined. Okay, so this cannot be the start because we have thus over here, right? This cannot be the start of the sentence. B says most people with progressive disease like dementia prefer to have control over their own lives and healthcare for as long as possible. So people who have this dementia, the disease of forgetfulness, and this is progressive, they prefer to have self-control. They prefer to have control over their own lives, right? We are talking about control. They prefer to have control, and look and see, having control means, among other things, that patients themselves perform self-management activities. Now, if you look at B and C very closely, you will find, a bonding happening between these two sentences. Do you agree with me? So there is a bonding in B and C, right? It is very easily deciphered. It can be inferred over here, right? D says supporting people in decisions and actions that promote self-management is called self-management support, right? Now, if you look at A talks about self-management, B talks about control, C talks about control. So self-management and self-control, more or less, they are being talked about. But if you look at D, D says self-management support requiring a cooperative relationship between the patient, the family, and the professionals, right? If you look at D, D is more or less a standalone sentence, right? D is more or less a standalone sentence. So if you look at B, it should be the opening sentence. Most people with progressive disease like dementia, it means if people have this disease, they are patients. Can we conclude that? And having control means, among other things, that patients themselves perform self-management activities. And this is what they want to perform. They prefer having control. If they prefer having control, then having control would mean what? Would mean that they would perform self-management activities. So B and C, this is a very strong link, isn't it? So can we say that B and C should be the opening sentence? All right. And since C talks about self-management activities, so we can define it as what? We can define it as the individual's ability to manage the symptoms, treatment, physical and psychosocial consequences, and lifestyle changes inherent in living with a chronic condition. And this is the reason why these people want to have self-control. So it's BCA. And since D talks about supporting people in decision and action that promotes self-management, is called self-management support. It is a standalone sentence. So any standalone sentence should be brought towards the end. So it should end the sequence. BCAD should be the sequence over here. All right. So it's red, 1, blue, 2, green, 3, and yellow, 4. It's B, C, A, D. That should be the sequence, right? Have you followed? Any sentence which is standalone must be the conclusion of the parajumble. All right. So it's B, C, A, D. That's the sequence. All right. So that was question number 5. So you could have applied the thought extender rule to solve the question. I won't say it's a rule, it's just a trick, or your way of looking at a particular parajumble question. Okay, can we do one more very quickly? Harsh, thought extender means you have a thought and there has to be a connecting sentence that expands on the given thought, right? It is just like moving from main idea to supporting idea. Something that supports or enlarges or extends your thought process. That is thought extender. Harsh. Like the flow of thoughts. Absolutely. You got this one right. Let us read A. The installation of atomic plants will help in meeting the shortage of these resources. B says electricity from water also requires enormous river valley projects involving huge expenditure. C says besides, the mineral resources of the world required for generation of electricity are being rapidly depleted. And D says, in contrast, electricity from atomic power stations will result in a tremendous saving in expenditure. Harsh was very prompt to reply. BDCA, he says. Thank you, Harsh. The others. This should be doable. Education World has also keyed in BDCA. Ashwin says BDCA. Okay. All right. Let's look at the question. The installation of atomic plants will help in meeting the shortage of these resources. This cannot be the opener, right? Electricity from water also requires enormous river valley projects involving huge expenditure. So you're talking about hydroelectricity, electricity from water, and you're talking about something negative about electricity from water, what it requires, and why it is not suited. It involves huge expenditure. He says, besides, the mineral resources of the world required for generation of electricity are being rapidly depleted. All right. D says, in contrast, electricity from atomic power station will result in a tremendous saving in expenditure, right? So what is the first thing that catches your attention, right? Electricity from water involving huge expenditure. This should be the start. And then the others will give you the reason why we should not look at electricity being produced from water. So B should be the start. Followed by D, because D gives you a solution. In contrast to this, electricity from atomic power will result in a tremendous saving in expenditure. So it talks about huge expenditure, B talks about huge expenditure, and D talks about savings. So BD is a mandatory link. So there is a bond. And if you look at C, besides means in addition to, it is adding a point, right? The mineral resources of the world required for generation of electricity are being rapidly depleted. That's why we should not look at hydroelectricity. Okay, it's BDC followed by A. A is a prediction, right? So when you install atomic plant, what will it help us in? It will help in meeting the shortage of these resources, the resources that we have spoken of in C and in other parts. These resources. It has a referent in C. That's why A should end the sequence. So it's B, D, C, A. That's the answer for you. All right. It's B, followed by this BDCA. All right. So these were a few questions which I thought you should be solving in today's class. And please understand that there is no substitute to practice. You should be practicing a lot of data-based questions. Look at the structure, go for the theme, and before you submit your answer, please revise your stuff properly. Because you may get a wrong sequence, but when you look at it once again, provided you have managed your time properly, that will help you keying in the right answer option. And please remember, there is no substitute to reading. You have to read a lot, right? Reading solves all the problems. So the only key to solving parajumble questions is to take up reading and read with a purpose. All right. I hope you have enjoyed the session today, and please join us for NMAT analysis. We are coming up live on the 12th of this month. We will talk about the cutoffs, the exam pattern, and the difficulty level. Don't forget the date. It is going to be 12th of October at 5 p.m. and our experts are going to be with you. It was fun being with you, Harsh. Thank you so much. All right. Also, all those who are targeting CAT 23, please enroll now. The enrollment is already started, and these are the features which our key products will have: lectures, the learning journey we'll talk about, the GDPI and the VATS, session, CAT learning tablet, live classroom session, and a host of other features. Don't forget to talk to our counselors today. Also, right, if you want to buy the 70 mock series covering all MBA exams, we have 20 CATs and 50 non-CATs. All right. And these are some of the features. You can read them and please avail this benefit. Next class is going to be very, very soon, right? Don't worry. We are going to come up with one more session. Okay. From 17th October onwards, right, last lap to CAT begins. It is going to be a complete revision in just 30 days. 17th October onwards, 7 p.m. we are going to go live with you people. 20 power-packed session with our eminent faculty members. We will talk about the strategies, the techniques, and the quickest way to solve the questions, right? Don't forget to hit the bell icon and press, and please share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel, join us on Facebook and Insta, and don't forget to join our Telegram group. I hope you have enjoyed the session today. On that note, this is Pradeep Sengupta signing off from BYJU'S Exam Prep, hoping to see you soon in the next class. All the best for CAT 2022, guys. Thank you, all of you.